Hey everyone, I'm Megs, and you're listening to the Mindful Megs podcast, Organizing an ADHD Brain, where you will hear stories from me and others on how we organize both our brains and our lives while living with ADHD. We talk about how ADHD can be your superpower if you know how to harness it. I found out I had ADHD 2 years ago, and it was very difficult for me to find acceptance. Now that I know so much, I want to share what I know and help others understand that this diagnosis is not your downfall. It's a eureka moment where you can now understand how your brain operates and how to figure out how to thrive. You can expect to feel inspired, like you're not alone, and learn about so many of the incredible organizational tools there are to help your head stay on straight. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mindful Megs podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to Bailey Pylant today. She is a licensed mental health professional out of New York, and I met her on TikTok, which, how random is that? Social media can totally be social if you allow yourself to get to that space. She posts a ton of videos about ADHD in women, the connection with eating disorders and ADHD, which we talk a ton about in this episode today, along with how she found out she had ADHD and her journey into the mental health profession. It's a pretty fascinating episode. It just hit me as I was recording today. I'm so excited to be doing a podcast, if for nothing else than for the conversations that come along with it. For so long, I felt like I needed to get really good at small talk, and I found that I didn't like it. I felt like I needed to know what to say in the right scenarios, and then I just felt so uncomfortable all the time. With podcasting, you get to have real conversations with real people without having to figure out what to say next. You just get to ask questions and listen and understand the perspective of someone else. And there is this element of connection that you don't necessarily get in the day-to-day life. That's why I love podcasting so much. And I'm so excited to be bringing my podcast to YouTube. This is really cool. And also here I am on face to face. I'm pretty pumped to be bringing you today's episode. And a big ask I have for all my listeners out there is, since I'm still a new podcast, I'm still trying to reach the people who could really benefit from this podcast. I created this for the me that was 2 years ago when I first found out I had ADHD. I had no idea how to handle it or even how to accept it. And now that I know so much about my ADHD brain, how it works, I want to help people understand how to organize their brain in a way that helps them thrive. And that's going to be different for everyone because everyone has different personalities. Everyone has other brain things they're working through. I'm not a doctor, but I do have experience with ADHD as far as my own journey. And so as we go along today, listen for experience and bring it to your doctor if you have questions about medicine or non-medicine and so on and so forth. With that said, please share the podcast with anyone you think could benefit from just understanding their brain a little bit better, so that they can really hone in on those creative abilities that they have. Please like, comment, share, post on social media if you can. I am on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. I also have a Facebook group if you'd like to join. It's Organizing an ADHD Brain. I'd love to answer questions that you might have, whether it's about organizing your stuff or organizing your brain. I'm here to help. And if I don't know, it gives me something else that I can go in and research so that I can bring that to the table in future episodes. So I'm super pumped to bring you Bailey today. Without further ado, here's the episode. Welcome back to the Mindful Megs podcast, Organizing an ADHD Brain. I am so thrilled to bring you today Bailey Pylant. I met her on TikTok because she was talking about ADHD and also happens to be a licensed therapist. And I got caught up in your videos and reached out, and here we are. And I'm so excited to learn more about you. Tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, my name's Bailey, and I am a licensed mental health counselor in New York. And I am a certified clinical provider for ADHD, and I specialize in working with women with ADHD, and I have ADHD myself.
Heck yeah. Oh my gosh. Like a fireball of ADHD.
And that's just scratching the surface.
How long have you been working with people with ADHD?
I kind of fell into specializing and working with individuals with ADHD. And a lot of that actually kind of happened through my own continued self discovery and building a better understanding of ADHD within myself. In reflection, I realized that there have been numerous clients that I've worked with, specifically women who probably had ADHD, but again, like I didn't recognize it at the time until I continued to learn more about ADHD, specifically ADHD in women. But for those that I did recognize it, I would help guide them towards diagnosis if that is something that they wanted to pursue. But I've been working with women with ADHD for about 3 years.
That's awesome. And how did you find out?
Find out about my own ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this is a story. Growing up, but first of all, I don't know if you experienced this, but after you get diagnosed with ADHD, you reflect back on your life and you're like, it was so obvious. Why did no one diagnose me? I do realize like why I flew under the radar for ADHD, but there were some very obvious signs. For example, I did gymnastics growing up, and my little sister also did gymnastics. And my gymnastics classes were Monday, Wednesday, and her gymnastics classes were Tuesday, Thursday. And I would go to my gymnastics classes on Monday and Wednesday, and then I would join her gymnastics classes on Tuesday and Thursday. And then I would go to open gym on Friday, beg my mom to go to open gym on Saturday because I had a lot of energy. And then
Mm-hmm.
Sunday, it was like I destroyed the house, would build forts and obstacle courses and practice gymnastics wherever I could. So it was like, okay, head scratcher there. I'm not sure how that flew under the radar. But when it came to my own diagnosis, I actually got diagnosed when I was 17. So I knew that at the time that ADHD needed to be a childhood diagnosis. And at the time, if you didn't get the diagnosis as a child, they were not going to diagnose you as an adult. So I had for years been dealing with anxiety and kept getting diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And I had tried anxiety medication after anxiety medication after anxiety medication, and nothing made a difference in my life. I felt no different on anxiety medication than I did not taking anxiety medication. And I still felt so like an outcast. I felt like an outcast, like there was something wrong with me. And I couldn't pinpoint it. And also at the time, you're in high school, schools kept getting harder and harder and harder for me. I remember in the third grade, I was actually tag tested, talented and gifted tested. And I still remember the test because I got so nervous and I couldn't recall the information. And I remember the proctor asking me questions, math questions, and sitting there like, I know the answer. I know the answer. I don't remember the answer, but I know the answer. And so I failed that test by 1%. And they wouldn't let me retake it ever. And I was so crushed. I was so crushed because as soon as the proctor left, I was like, I remember. I remember
Oh my,
and I could remember the questions and I remembered all the answers right after they left and I was no longer nervous anymore. But I digress. So after all this failed anxiety medication and anxiety treatment and just feeling like, what is wrong with me? What is going on? Why is school getting harder? Why am I having a harder time concentrating? What is up with these like mood swings that I experience? And I somehow found myself on a deep dive on the internet, in the early internet. And I came across this article that had recently been published on the presentation of women with ADHD. And I read this article and I was like, that's me. That's me. That's all of my symptoms. This is me. This article is describing me. And I felt so seen in that article, but I also felt so nervous that I was going to be rejected again for getting a diagnosis. And because at the time, ADHD was still kind of is a little taboo and people didn't really want to talk about it. There was all this like talk around the stigma and overdiagnosing. So I was nervous to even talk about it with my doctor. But I also read in the article that ADHD is genetic. And I was like, ding, ding, ding. I have an older brother with ADHD. I have all the symptoms. I have I have ADHD. And thankfully I did. I brought it to my doctor. I brought the article and I was like, here's this article. It describes me. No, and I handed it to my doctor. I was like, I have ADHD. This article describes me. It describes every single symptom. It describes my experience. You know, my older brother has ADHD. ADHD is genetic. I have ADHD. And my doctor said, okay, let's try medication. And I kid you not, the first time I took that medication was the first time I didn't feel anxious. And it was like
Wow.
the brain fog lifted, the anxiety went away. I was like, what is I can think. I don't feel just so tired and bogged down. I was like, oh, this is what it's like to like breathe and be calm.
That's incredible.
It was a
I
really
love that so much. No, it's perfect because well, I can relate to it so much. That's the first thing I did when I found out I had ADHD. I started searching. Well, I thought she was wrong. I was like, there's no way she's right. I went in knowing that we were talking about ADHD and expecting to get diagnosed, but I still left thinking, there's no way that I've had ADHD my whole life and I didn't know until just now. And yeah, I re-examined almost everything that's happened in my life. And so much of school I thought for sure that I was just bad at school, that other people were just good at it. I was always really good at math, actually. Math, I loved so much. And because everything made sense so much, my math teacher, he was one of the worst teachers I've ever had, but he would try to teach something. The class wouldn't get it, but I would understand what he was trying to say. So I would go up and explain it in a different way so that people could understand.
wow.
And right? But
Yeah.
none of my other classes I could do that. Like it was the reading history and things like that. Now with Audible, like where I can actually listen to things and then speed them up, I'm like, yes, I sign me up for this because I'll learn all day long. But no, I think that story resonates with me and I think with so many other people. So from there, you went to college and decided to become a therapist?
No.
Okay.
No, that's not what happened. Actually, from there, I went to college. And again, I told you there was a lot of stigma around ADHD still. And there wasn't a lot of information about what ADHD looked like in women. And so, because there wasn't really any conversation around what ADHD is, how it is going to impact me, one, I didn't even know that I could have gotten services for like longer test taking time. I actually deal with auditory processing stuff. So sometimes especially when I don't take my medication, people know when I don't take my medication, I will just blankly stare at you and smile. And I have no idea what you're saying to me most of the time. Sometimes it's just like I give the most dead look and then I go, I have no idea what you said. But when
You're
I
good.
started college, because of the stigma, I actually was I kind of kept it to myself. And then when I did tell people that I had ADHD and that I was taking ADHD medication, there was all this backlash of like, there's no way you have ADHD. Like, you don't look like someone who has ADHD. ADHD is overdiagnosed. Stimulant medication is bad, blah, blah, blah. And I think I made it through halfway through my freshman year and I stopped taking my medication. And that was probably one of the biggest mistakes I could have ever done. It also got really challenging because at the time, this was pre-pandemic. So you had to drive to your doctor's office, pick up the physical script for the medication, and then take it to the pharmacy every 30 days. And so in trying to manage college, I also was working almost full time and trying to manage the ADHD and everything that goes into that big life transition. I stopped managing it. I kind of gave up and I really did believe that there was just something wrong with me and I just had to figure it out. It wasn't, and to be honest, in my undergrad, I actually changed my major 8 times.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
No, there's nothing wrong with that because I almost wish I did because I was so focused on trying to get it right and trying to get the right major because I was a music major. And then people told me I wouldn't make any money. So I became a business major. But then everyone was doing marketing. So I was like, okay, is that what I should do? I don't know. But then finally I found something I was actually passionate about. But no judgment here. None.
It's very similarly. I originally wanted to go to school to become a social worker because I thought that's how you became a therapist. And then everyone was like, social workers don't make any money. And got scared. I was like, I don't want to do that. I need money. And so then I switched to teaching. And then I worked as an educational assistant. And I quickly realized I don't think I want to be a teacher. And from teaching, I then went to journalism. And then I decided I really dislike writing. And so I went back to teaching. And then I can't remember, I think I went back. Oh, and then I went to a liberal arts degree. Like that was when they started doing like, you can do a liberal arts degree, just take whatever classes. And then I took my first communications class and I was like, communications, that's where it's at. And then I think I switched back one more time to education and then I switched back to communications. So I actually ended up graduating with communications. And at that time, again, there was no thought. I didn't even think I could ever become a therapist. I didn't think I was smart enough. Oh, psychology. At one point, my degree was psychology because I had always had therapists in the back of my head. And I remember taking my psychology classes and a couple other classes, and I didn't think I was smart enough to become a therapist because I struggled so much in school because of untreated, unmanaged ADHD.
What happened after that? So when you graduated, how did you build the courage and confidence to move forward?
Fabulous question. Originally, I'm from Portland, Oregon. And after I graduated from my undergraduate degree from Portland State University, I then decided to move to New York City. And with my then boyfriend, now husband, I convinced him to move to New York and we moved to the city and I got my first job as an office manager. And I had worked all throughout undergraduate as a nanny. I was a barista for a very long time. I worked as a hostess. I worked at a cycling studio. I was also a residential ambassador, like an RA for a nonprofit housing organization in Portland. And I competed in pageantry. I did a lot of things. So I convinced him to move to New York City and I got my first job out of college as an office manager. And I thought that I wanted to go into PR because PR is what a lot of communications majors go into, but I had no experience in PR. So I was like, okay, I'm going to work at this PR firm as the office manager. I'm going to learn PR and eventually I'm going to move bilaterally in this company and move into PR. And I hated it. I hated every part of it. Now, unlike you, I did not get the ADHD that is so focused on like attention to detail and organization. There's like some areas where I have organization, but for the most part, it's if you ask me to like really pay attention to detail and organization, I am out. So out. I am running. And that was a huge part of my job. And I was miserable. I was like, I felt like I was a nanny to adults. And there was so much about PR in of itself, like that I even realized that's not the move that I wanted to make. And I really disliked working in corporate America. Yeah.
Same.
I didn't like these weird, there's like social rules kind of, and like these weird like communication rules, especially in emailing. Oh, I got in trouble so many times because I was too direct in my emails. I wasn't nice enough.
Oh my gosh. I remember I used to read my emails probably 5 times before they went out because I felt like I had to get it right. But it's not like I ever took a course in email writing. I just felt like I needed to reread and reread. Oh my gosh. Oh, emails.
Yep. And this was like pre-chat GPT.
Mhm.
Such a great tool. Yeah. So, anyways, in my misery, I was doing a ton of self-reflection and self-exploration. And I just kept coming back to health and how important mental health was to me. A little backstory: I had an eating disorder and had gone through my own therapy for an eating disorder. And I just kept coming back to wanting to help people in being their best selves and discovering themselves in ways that like my therapist had helped me over the years. And also just not wanting people to feel so alone as I did and have in many areas, many times throughout my life. And I also realized that working in a large group setting was not for me, that I did really well and thrived in one-on-one settings, and that I really enjoyed those relationships that you make in one-on-one settings. And so in my frantic research, I thought about becoming a life coach, but I was like, that just wasn't good enough for me, as you keep going back to wanting to get it right. For me, I felt like getting a certification wasn't going to make me an expert enough, that I wasn't going to be qualified enough. And that got me going down this rabbit hole of research on Google until I stumbled across the qualifications needed to get a master's in mental health counseling. And I was like, that's it, I'm doing it.
Awesome. I think you are the perfect person to be there for people who have been through so much, especially when it comes to ADHD. I too had an eating disorder growing up. Just to share a tiny bit. So I was very large as a kid. And I realize now I kind of look back on it now. I never really understood. My dad always said, "Oh, it's just baby fat. It'll go away." And I'm like, I'm in seventh grade. I was really overweight going into seventh grade. But as I reflect back on it now, I would eat to get the dopamine that I was looking for. My mom is deaf, and so it was very hard to communicate with her as a kid. And then my dad was in the Navy until he retired. And then when he got out, all of my siblings had basically moved out of the house already. I'm the youngest of four, and I didn't have a ton of people to talk to. So that's what I did is I ate, and that's what I found comfort in. And then in high school, I wanted so much to not be that bigger kid that I stopped eating. And then it was a complete game changer, right? So I went from being this big kid to not, but I had to do these other things in order to get there. But that gave me a completely different dopamine rush, which is kind of crazy. I struggled with weight my whole life, and I got bariatric surgery 2 years ago now. And I lost 120 pounds. And it's been one of the best things I could have ever done for myself, because I was able to reset my body so that I could eat like a normal human. What is normal anyway? But it gave me just a new way of living my life where I wasn't looking in the mirror and concentrating on my body every day. Like I was so focused on being overweight that I was looking in the mirror every day and saying, how do I become skinny today? And then on the other extreme, I was so little that I was like, how do I maintain this by not eating? So I feel like I'm finally healthy in a way that I never have been. So I think it's fascinating because you've been talking about how eating disorders are so common with women in ADHD. Can you tell us about your journey?
Yeah, yeah, I would love to. So I actually was the opposite of you. I was really thin, like very thin my entire childhood. Like this is so embarrassing, but my mom used to carry my booster seat with me because I had to sit in a car seat until I was in seventh grade because I was so small. And it took me a very long time to gain weight. And actually I had just gotten out of the booster seat in sixth grade. And then I got the flu during Thanksgiving, and it was awful, awful. And it put me right back below the required weight to get out of a car seat. And I was in a lot of sports, and I was super active. And I think I got a lot of my dopamine from doing sports and being so active. But then the shift happened was seventh grade. I finally got out of that booster seat, and I had gained that weight. I was delayed developmentally, physically, also probably a little cognitively too, but
That's fair. That's fair.
that prefrontal cortex. Uh,
Right.
but in seventh grade, the summer of seventh grade going into eighth grade is actually when I started my period. And that is when not only did the ADHD symptoms get so much worse, but that's also when my PCOS probably actually started to come through, because when you have PCOS, you're born with it, but it really doesn't, it can kind of become active. And I think it did become active when I was younger. I actually started breaking out, and I had really bad acne starting when I was 9 years old. I had acne.
Oh
Um,
my gosh.
yeah, 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 I know. A 9-year old with acne. So And it was super embarrassing and I hated it. And we didn't understand why I had it or why I got it. And I'd go to a dermatologist and nothing worked. But when I was, I think 14, I started my period. And between starting my period and going into like starting eighth grade, going into my freshman year of high school, in that 1 year, I think I gained around 40 pounds. I think I went from around 75 pounds to 125. And it was this rapid weight gain that freaked me out. It really freaked me out. And it felt uncomfortable because I also didn't really grow. So it was just, I stopped growing. I started this period. I was all of a sudden having all of these really terrible symptoms every month. I was in and out of the hospital. At one point, I had a kidney infection and didn't know because of the period pain and just kept not getting diagnosed. I didn't get diagnosed with PCOS. And again, I didn't have that ADHD diagnosis. So I was really struggling and I was struggling internally, but that internal struggle obviously got projected out. And I told you earlier in the podcast that I also have a hard time with auditory stuff. So I don't always hear or comprehend what is being said to me. And so trying to manage all of this and deal with all of this on my own and feeling like there was just something wrong with me also led to me feeling like a social outcast, especially because I started missing, I'd already been missing social cues for a while, but in high school, it got worse. Like it was really hard for me to pick up on social cues. I wasn't fitting in. I wasn't making friends. And I felt so isolated. And I started to become, for some reason, a prime target of bullying. And I had already been bullied all through middle school and it just got worse in high school. And so I ended up actually transferring schools. And transferring schools, all of a sudden, people were interested in who I was. They wanted to get to know me. I was in choir and I was super passionate about choir. And in these relationships and in all of these changes, I started to lose weight. And I'm not totally sure how, except that some of it was that I wanted to lose weight and I wanted to be thinner. And I started to make what I thought were healthier choices. But these healthier choices then progressed to becoming more self-harm and developing more into an eating disorder. And I said this in a video where I talked about my eating disorder, is that I felt so socially rejected by my peers and by my family too, that my eating disorder developed as a way of rejecting myself and reminding myself that I wasn't acceptable. And so it was worse when I felt that the most. And I think I got off your question a little bit.
No, not at all. This is so powerful. I thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing because no matter what size you are, women and girls, I have two girls and it scares the hell out of me what they're going to go through as we continue to learn more about our brains and the world continues to change. And there's so much that we're having to deal with that we don't necessarily know how to communicate. And we're pretty sure that my daughter, who's almost 7, has ADHD. And it's been really neat to learn about myself and then learn how to parent during that progression. And it's also scary at the same time because there's still so much that I don't know. So that's really incredible that you went through that. I know that you talk about it now as, there's that connection between ADHD and an eating disorder. What is the connection?
We can look at it just as with everything, it's totally individual. It's completely individual. I know for myself, it really progressed the more that I felt that social rejection and that strive for perfection and wanting to be seen as put together and perfect because externally, I wanted to give off this image that I was put together, but internally, I felt chaotic, and everything about me and myself in the way that I saw myself and thought about myself was just chaos. So this link between eating disorders and ADHD can manifest in multiple ways, and it depends on the individual. They can come up in men as well. And actually, men with ADHD do have a higher risk of developing an eating disorder. Fun fact. But specifically because I focus on working mostly with women and I am a woman myself, is we have this elevated risk because of the executive dysfunctions, right? I already mentioned that I felt like chaos internally, and that chaos was all related to unmanaged, undiagnosed ADHD. I felt like, why can't you get it, Bailey? Like, why can't you just complete the homework assignment like everyone else is completing the homework assignment? Why are you skipping directions? Why did you make that stupid mistake on the test? These were all these internal negative thoughts that I was constantly feeling. And then when I would do something socially that was not acceptable, it then became going internally, like beating myself up. And then when it came to organization and impulsivity, definitely dealt with impulsivity. But specifically, as the eating disorder in myself progressed, and what we see with other women with ADHD who develop eating disorders, is it has to do with impulse control and emotional regulation, which I don't know if you can relate to that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, when you mentioned control and the chaos going on up here, it was mind-boggling to me when I found out that other people's brains didn't work like mine and that people can actually turn it off when they go to sleep at night. I'm like, what is that like? And and then it reminded me, I felt like when I had an eating disorder, I had some sort of control over what was going on, but that was pretty much the only thing I could control in my life.
Yeah.
And I struggled with friendships too and kind of bouncing around, and that was a big struggle for me. But I think like the mood swings too, I've been looking into this a lot more and how that's related to ADHD. And something I have heard a lot is angry cleaning. Have you ever heard of angry
I do
cleaning?
it all the time.
Okay.
That's how my husband knows I'm angry. I was just gonna say, to wrap up the eating disorder stuff, but this also kind of relates to the angry cleaning, is we find these areas where we can feel in control, but specifically because doing so, the eating disorder or the disordered behavior and or the angry cleaning is a form of self-medication, right? It temporarily alleviates this negative emotion that we're experiencing. But the key word is temporary, right? It comes back. It doesn't fully go away. And we can also use these behaviors as a way of comfort, trying to cope with feelings of inadequacy, incompetence, or especially when it comes to trying to manage other areas of our life. And then we also use it for self-regulation and contributing to like the challenges in various life domains that we are experiencing, right? It's not that we're just dealing with executive function on our own and trying to manage ourselves, but we're dealing with executive function deficits at school, at work, at home, in our relationships with social peers, with our family, etc. And it becomes really overwhelming very easily and very quickly. And food can be used as that coping mechanism to seek, again, that sense of control and comfort so that we can find self-regulation, just like angry cleaning can also bring us that self-regulation that we're seeking. What these two behaviors are missing, and what I do a lot, actually, a large part of my work with ADHDers, is teaching them how to connect with their bodies and connect with their emotions, because both of these activities remove us from our body and remove us from our emotions and take us out, instead of giving us a space to allow us to feel what we're feeling, because we already constantly feel so uncomfortable in our body and our bodily sensations. When we add on top of it this negative emotion, it is like, get me out now.
Yeah, it's like
And
fight or flight.
mm-hmm.
When it comes to ADHD, you work with so many women with ADHD. And what I think is wonderful about having these conversations is normalizing the fact that ADHD it's out there and it's not necessarily something that has to be your downfall, especially when you know how to manage it. And you can talk about things like angry cleaning and possibly having an eating disorder. And in the other way too, right, where you're constantly seeking food to cope. So how do you manage your day-to-day life? And I call it organization because I don't think that we give ourselves enough credit. How do you organize your life in a way where you can manage your ADHD better so that you can thrive in your daily life?
Well, I do want to preface that I am a big believer in continuity, not consistency. So, because I'm going to change and every day is good. I don't know what I'm going to wake up to. Every day, I don't know how I'm going to feel when I wake up. And I also mentioned my husband also has ADHD. So I think something that we both do that really helps us, and something that this has actually been really challenging for me since I made the full leap into private practice. This was like a big shift for me, is keeping a schedule. And it is so hard to do because I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if I can like book that doctor's appointment a month ahead because I don't know if something else is going to come up and if I'm going to need to do that doctor's appointment. But I have started to build a better understanding of myself and the way that I work. And so I've learned, okay, if I'm going to book an appointment, it's better to do it in the middle of the week because I'm less likely to be traveling home from somewhere or forgetting about it over the weekend and not being able to remember. And I always book it for the morning because I'm like, okay, I know in the morning, I'm more willing to go and get it done, get it taken.
Yeah.
The longer the day goes, the less likely I am to leave my apartment. But really having a schedule has helped us so much. We've developed this habit where we get up in the morning and the first thing we do in the morning is we go to the gym and we work out. And that has been game changer for me, getting up and going to the gym, because it gives me one, when I get to the gym, I'm still not even fully awake. I'm still processing, but it gets me moving and it gets me like my body active, and it really starts to set the tone for my day. And when you work out, you release endorphins, the happy feelings. So if I get up and go to the gym and I'm working out and I'm releasing all these happy feelings, I'm more likely to have a better day. And then on top of that, there's so much research out there that has said that for up to like 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes after work exercising, ADHD executive functioning increases. So yes, yeah, that's why we do it, because we didn't know this. I think it just was, we didn't make the connection until I started doing all this research and was working towards my certification. I was like, oh my God, that's why we do it. That's why we get up, because everyone thinks we're crazy for getting up and going to the gym every day. And I was like, no, that's why, because it literally helps both of us get out the door on time. It helps us
Yes.
organize our morning so that we can do what we need to do.
That was part one of a two-part series I did with Bailey Pylant. The next episode is going to drop on Wednesday of this week. I drop a new episode every Monday. So if you want to make sure you don't miss out on the next episode, subscribe to my channel on YouTube, follow the podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts, and also share this podcast with someone who you think could benefit from it. I would appreciate that so much. My goal is to help people with ADHD understand that they're not broken. And the more people that listen, the more people we can help empower. I look forward to chatting again so soon on Wednesday. Oh, and before I forget, I put together a little template for myself. It's a PDF download for my daily to-do list. I only list 6 things on it a day. I know that sounds like so little, but if you're anything like me, that you make a ton of lists that never get checked off, and then next day you're making a list that's 30 things long and you can't seem to get it done, try this out. At the top, it's priorities, and then you list the things that you need to do with your priorities. then you add it to your Google Calendar or something that's going to remind you. It has helped me so much. And then I'm constantly evolving it so that I can share and see how it helps people. And of course, share how it's helped me. I think no matter what, you can take a look at it and see if it's something that can elevate your life, even if you don't take it exactly how I do it, which is cool. So I'll drop the link for that below. It's always on my link tree, which I have down below in the show notes.
And I've included a link to Remedy Bath Skincare below. This is owned and operated by one of my favorite people who has been in business for a couple years now. And I have been using her CBD bath bombs for years, and they're so incredible. I've never had a bath bomb that smells or works better than this, and CBD is just an extra pressure taker offer, if those are the words you want to use. Check it out below. I also included my link. It's Meg Bathco, and you can save 10% off of your order. Another way you can support the podcast is by using my link if you want to try out HelloFresh. It's an amazing way to automate your grocery shopping and try new foods. It takes so much of the thinking out of planning for the week. My ADHD brain has been so appreciative of HelloFresh. We've actually been using for I think all of 2024 now. We've tried so many new foods, some that we didn't like as much as we have liked, but oh, so many amazing flavors. And I'm so thrilled to not have to think ahead to try to figure out what's for dinner, especially when my husband and I are managing jobs and then, of course, our kiddos at the same time. I want to reiterate, I am not a doctor, and most of the people I talk to are not doctors or medical professionals. What's really important here is that you shouldn't be using the show to diagnose. I wanted to make this show available to people who wanted to be able to relate to other people like them. I know I needed this tenfold when I first found out that I had ADHD, and I didn't know there were so many other people out there who had either gone through similar circumstances or were going through them at the same time as I was. So if this helps anyone feel like their brain works like other people's and we can relate to something, if you're trying to figure out if you have ADHD or not, please talk to your therapist or a medical professional so that you can truly understand what kind of options you have out there for support and, of course, for medicine. And then come here as you're along the ride for the journey and listen to people who are going through similar circumstances and understand that it's not a one-size-fits-all sort of diagnosis. There's so many options and opportunities out there for you. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to hear from you.